We say that our main product is connections. We generate connections among people, among ideas, data, foundations to applications, internal and external partners, and even frameworks of intellectual engagement when we say that we not only focus on research, but research, scholarship, and creative expressions. These are different ways of asking and answering questions.
From the heart of The Ohio State University on the Oval, this is Voices of Excellence from the College of Arts and Sciences, with your host, David Staley. Voices focuses on the innovative work of arts and sciences faculty and staff, with departments as wide-ranging as art, astronomy, chemistry and biochemistry, physics, emergent materials, and mathematics and languages, among many others. The college always has something exciting happening. Join us to find out what's new now.
Joining me today in the ASC Tech Studios is Tanya Berger Wolf, Director of the Translational Data Analytics Institute and a Professor of Computer Science Engineering, Electrical and Computer Engineering, as well as Evolution, Ecology, and Organismal Biology at The Ohio State University. Welcome to Voices, Dr. Berger Wolf.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'd like to begin, first of all, with translational data analytics. And maybe we start with a definition. What does that term mean?
Well, recently, hopefully, most people have heard about the data and the analytics, and maybe even translational, but in some different context. So every one of those words, hopefully, are familiar. But data analytics is obviously the analysis of data and all the techniques that come with it. And we think of it as a little bit more general, as anybody who generates, touches, is excited by, is producing methods for analysis, and is representing data in their research, scholarship, and creative expressions. Obviously, that's pretty much everybody today. The translational aspect of it refers of translating data into actionable insight, what beyond applied. This is what in clinical sciences people often refer to translational science as translating from bench to bedside.
Bench to bedside.
Yes. So
from the lab to
clinical settings. In the broader sense, which we use the same term of translational data analytics, is translating from the foundational research and scholarship to the applications that are beyond the university. And we work with partners outside of the university, and this is government, nonprofits, businesses, and healthcare organizations, as well as just being motivated by solving societal challenges and addressing societal questions with data.
And I want to get to some of those, but when we say data, is this any different from statistics?
Well, we have faculty from all 15 colleges of the university, representing 60-plus disciplines. Everybody from arts and humanities to statistics and computer science. When people think of the core of data analytics, what comes to mind is probably statistics and maybe these days artificial intelligence, machine learning, but certainly the applications of data analytics, the implications of data analytics, all the aspects of how do we use data analytics in society to answer societal questions, to really address societal challenges, that goes way beyond statistics. How do we bring in data analytics to do healthcare, to public health? We had a huge public health crisis that's beyond statistics. When we talk about the ethical and responsible data science and AI, this is not something that statisticians are equipped to address, or computer scientists who generate the computational approaches. This is something that we need to work in partnership with social scientists, with ethicists, with policy scholars, with legal scholars. These kinds of issues have moved very much beyond the boundaries of statistics and computer science. We even have an art and data program and a joint postdoc co-founded by the Translational Data Analytics Institute and the Global Arts and Humanities Discovery Theme, who looks at issues of the identity and self-representation in the age of computer-generated art and text. which is something we're all familiar now with. We have scholars who look at the public discourse in 19th century France as an example of sort of public social media. These are all data. In general, one could think that history is a data science, right? So,
my colleagues might be very interested to learn that.
right. How else do we learn about what happened if not through evidence and data?
It sounds like these scholars are not sort of working in isolation or working in their disciplinary silos. It sounds like all the projects involved are very interdisciplinary. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. This is the mission of TDI and institutes like it. We say that our main product is connections. We generate connections among people, among ideas, data, foundations to applications, internal and external partners, and even frameworks of intellectual engagement when we say that we not only focus on research, but research, scholarship, and creative expressions. These are different ways of asking and answering questions.
Mm-hmm. You started to talk about some of these. Tell us some of the social challenges that TDAI is addressing.
TDI has 5 strategic directions because everybody needs a strategic direction. So we have 2 foundational strategic directions, cross-cutting, and then 3 what one would term as applications. The foundational ones are not surprisingly foundations of data science and AI, and that really is closer to statistics, mathematics, and computer science. And the other cross-cutting foundational direction is ethical and responsible data science and AI. We think that it is these days fundamental to any engagement with data and data analytics. And then our application directions are health, environment, sustainability and climate, and smart mobility. And so when we talk about health, this goes beyond just clinical science. It is about public health, about individual and public health and well-being. And well-being, again, this is not only what happens in the doctor's office. Mm-hmm. It is where we live, how we live, who we live with, in what environment we live, how does the environment at home, at work, with the family, and outside impact our physical and mental health.
You arrived at Ohio State from the University of Illinois. What drew you to Ohio State?
Well, there was this advertisement for the position of the director of the Translational Data Analytics Institute, and I found this a really exciting and unique opportunity to enable interdisciplinary research at scale. And the scale at OSU is really impressive. The ability to really bring people together in a single environment, whether it's intellectual, virtual, physical, is really exciting to me. This is something that this is how my brain works, this is how I do research, and this is, I think, where a lot of exciting research happens, but it's not very common in a university setting to have that opportunity. I joked when I came to OSU that my job as the director of the Translational Data Analytics Institute, the official title is Chief Serendipity Facilitator. But unfortunately, I came to OSU in January 2020. So the timing was... Yeah, the timing for serendipity facilitation was really unfortunate. We found out that serendipity and creativity do not really happen on Zoom very well.
That's so.
Yeah, it is really, really hard to make these unplanned connection happen, because you plan every meeting, you plan who is going to be at that meeting, what the agenda is going to be, and you cannot have these overlapping conversations. Only one person can talk at a time, only one idea can be heard. You cannot have side conversations, you cannot have that spark of an idea happen. And we're slowly coming back. We've also learned a lot how to move the needle a little bit on that creativity aspect of Zoom conversations and meetings. But I'm really, really excited that we're finally coming back in full 3D and can really help that serendipity and creativity happen by bringing people together, by maybe starting a conversation and letting people fly, letting people just do what we as researchers love doing, which is ask questions and see where the thought takes us.
I'd like to talk about your research, and you are a computational ecologist. And I'd like you, first of all, tell us what computational ecology is.
Well, my research is, I'm a computer scientist, first of all. I did my training and my PhD, and everything that I do, I still think as a computer scientist, but I speak ecologies very, very well. And I've worked with biologists for the last 20 plus years. I'm also married to one. I blame him for all of that. And the questions, the challenges, the problems that are coming from biologists. And particularly the biologists that I work with are ecologists. So they're interested not only of the study of organisms, but in the context of their environment and evolution, but with the emphasis on environment. And the specific type of biologists that I started working with, behavioral ecologists. So they're interested in the behavior of animals in the context of their environment and often evolution. And so the first conversations that happened were mostly around understanding animal behavior using computational approaches. It grew beyond that, and so my research now is computational ecology, environment, and conservation. So it went beyond ecology. It still sits at the intersection of the specific type of biology, which is ecology and evolutionary biology, wildlife biology, as well as social sciences and computer science.
It sounds like you're talking about biology as data. Is that what ecology and biology is today? Is it about really the study of data?
Oh, absolutely not.
And not like sort of living things? Or?
Absolutely not. The biologists that I work with really go out into the field and study those zebras and baboons and ants and birds and plants and everything else out in the natural habitats. Occasionally those natural habitats are cities, but yes, but they're still natural habitats, field biologists. And the fundamental biological understanding, the scientific method hasn't changed. It is all, to quote André Poincaré, is about observation and experiment. And we still go through the cycle of observing, then generating a hypothesis, and then conducting an experiment that tests that hypothesis. The quote that I really, really like from Poincaré's book in the early 20th century, where the book is Science and Method, which lays down really this kind of formal definition of what we today call the scientific method. And so he concludes this book saying the scientific method consists in observation and experiment. Shocking. If the scientist had an infinity of time at his disposal, it would be sufficient to say to him, look and look carefully. But since he has no time to look at everything, and above all to look carefully, and, something I tell my students all the time, since it is better not to look at all than to look carelessly, he's forced to make a selection. The first question then is to know how to make this selection. And so what I would argue that data science, computer science, technology altogether have not changed in any way the scientific method. What they have done is enabling scientists to look at more things more carefully. And that has been my entire career. On the one hand, technology brings in more things to look at, whether it's the microscope that increased the resolution and went down to the very minimal scale of the cell and subcellular and so on, or the telescopes and the satellites that increased the scale to the entire planet. Technology is only enabling scientists to look at more things. Computational methods, I would argue, are the ones that are helping scientists to look more carefully at those things. Because at that level of things to look at, the human brain needs a little bit of help to find patterns, to find associations, and to test whether these patterns are significant, interesting, important in the context of all of the deluge of all the other things to look at. And so computational approaches are actually good at that, but they are only a partner in the scientific exploration.
It sounds like you fell into this through serendipity. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is. Very much so. As an undergraduate student, I was very much a math and computer science. But as I mentioned, my husband, who is in ecology, Berger Wolf, I spent many, many conversations with him and his colleagues where I walked away with a feeling, oh my God, there's got to be a better way of answering this question. And it continued into my PhD, which was very theoretical computer science. But towards the end of it, I really felt that there's too many times where I felt that I could find a better way of answering these ecological questions. And so I figured I should actually try. And I did postdocs in and I was trying to find a way to call this. What should I call this field? And at the time, computational biology was really starting to become, well, mainstream. Everybody in sciences, at least, knew about the Human Genome Project. They were training computational biologists. People were talking about that field. And I was like, okay, well, computational biology is mostly about molecular biology and the genome. What would you call something which is about the ecology type of biology? Well, it should be computational ecology, obviously, right? And I had to explain to everybody. That's the problem with coming up with a term, because you then have to explain to everybody what it actually means. And I did a postdoc with ecologists. And while doing that, I also started talking to ecologists beyond my advisors, beyond my mentors, found a wonderful collaborator, Dan Rubenstein in Princeton, who was asking questions about behavior of zebras. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, it's like this social network stuff, which was also all the rage that people were doing at the time. Facebook was just beginning, all these online social platforms. Like, but I'm sure somebody has done, because you need not the static version, but dynamic. Mm-hmm. And turns out that nobody has done. So we had to develop it, and we developed a whole framework of computational approaches and then applied it to understanding behavior of zebras. And then weirdly, I don't know why, but it took my colleagues 3 years to get me actually out into the field to see those zebras. They kept on saying, you got to see your data, you got to see your data. I'm like, no, my data looks perfectly fine on a computer screen in a CSV file. They're like, no, you got to see your data. You'll get really what we're asking. And so 3 years later, I did go to Kenya and saw the zebras and got completely different understanding of the questions that they were asking, the implicit assumptions that they were making, and why they were asking these questions in that particular way. It's because, in some cases, it's because that's the data that they could get. And so we got into all these conversations, what are the questions that you would like to ask? Mm-hmm. And realizing that in some cases they didn't have enough data, they didn't have enough tools. So I am not a biologist. I do understand the questions. I do understand the biologies and ecologies. I speak fluently it now. But the way I answer questions, the way I pose questions is still from very computational perspective. And so when I ask them, how do you know who's zebra friend? We're standing in the field and they're saying, okay, well, you see those zebras interacting. This is a social group, and this is a social network. This is how we represent it. I'm like, wait. How do you know who's who here? And they showed me this, how they take very carefully, they take a photograph. It has to be unobscured. It has to be from a particular side. They bring it back to the lab. They have to click on the outside of the zebra, and it has to be very carefully fit into the particular model and match stripe for stripe. The whole process took 20 minutes. I'm an impatient engineer. 2 minutes into it, I was like, how long is it going to take? 5 minutes later, I'm like, this is taking forever. How long is it going to take? And they're like, patience, Tanya, patience. I'm like, this is nuts. This is insane. This should take 2 clicks in a couple of seconds. Like, oh, if you're saying that this is what it should take, so why don't you do it? I'm like, you want to bet?
Uh-oh.
Yep. And so this was a bet. I went to my PhD student at the time, Mike Lahiri, and I said, I just bet my reputation that we can recognize individual zebras from photographs with 2 clicks. Luckily, luckily we also had an idea of how we might go about it. And also very luckily that my colleague Dan Rubenstein, the zebra expert of the world, and I were planning to teach a course, because we thought, okay, our collaboration is fantastic, but we need to train the next generation of interdisciplinary scientists, of computational ecologists, and we need to take them to the field to see their data. So we planned what we then called Field Computational Ecology course, where we took computer science and ecology students, ecology and evolutionary biology students, gave them a background in both disciplines, took them to the field in Kenya, told them, you have to work together, you've got to do something amazing, something that neither of you can answer on your own. Go. And they did. But the first project in that course was identifying individual zebras from photographs. And that kind of gave the foundation to a lot of work.
I'm interested in your current project. I'm going to make certain I got the name right. Imageomics? Am I saying this right?
Perfect.
Tell us about imageomics.
Well, this is a perfect segue because this ability to identify individual zebras from photographs was both fundamental computer vision research that had implications for fundamental biological research. And we also discovered, once we published a paper in an obscure computer vision conference, that it was very, very useful for conservation. Within 2 months of publishing a paper in this obscure conference, we got requests for about 70, can you identify my species, can you identify my species? Everything from Hawaiian snails to whale sharks. And so we realized that we needed to build something that could be used. That's the translational aspect of research. Build something that could be used by practitioners, conservation biology practitioners, managers in the field, conservation managers in the field, not only used for publishing computer vision papers or even doing fundamental biological research. Because the ability to identify an individual animal from photograph allows you to track them, count them, even do their social network from photos without putting collars on them or other sensors. It also allows you to bring a lot of data that wasn't useful before, such as all the social media data, that people go on vacations, take pictures of animals that they see there and post on all these social media platforms. This is the ability to bring in more things to look at for scientists, right? And also to let them look at it more carefully. Imageomics goes beyond this. The new field of science that we start establishing with the help of the National Science Foundation grant in the program of Harnessing Data Revolution, which we received a year and a half ago. Imageomics is the field of science that extracts biological information from images. Like genomics before it is the field of science of extracting biological information from sequences, from text, using quantitative approaches for the most part. Imageomics is, in a similar way, going from images to biological traits, to phenotypes, and for the first time, giving scientists this ability to look and look carefully, right, at the natural world, now with the help of recording devices at different scales, in different contexts, whether it's camera traps, autonomous vehicles underwater, on the ground, and in the air, or our phones that, everybody just takes pictures when they go on vacation. It doesn't matter. Or satellites, remote sensing, or the microscopes. We have now the ability, or we're developing, this is the hope, to go from looking to finding the biological traits, something that we may have even missed. So not only to be able to say this is the species of bird, which we can do right now, but this is the species of bird because it has a yellow belly, black behind the beak, and it wobbles when it walks. So for wobbling, you obviously need videos, not just images, but still images, but yes. And maybe not only these are the traits that we already know, but because we've missed something due to our inability to see, maybe in the red-orange spectrum, we missed some traits because our inability to quantify them, or even inattention. We didn't even think they could be important. Computationally, we actually can help scientists see things that they may have not seen before, or have no ability to see at all.
Like a microscope or telescope.
Like a microscope or a telescope. Or there was a paper that showed up in December that showed that humans could not differentiate between a particular phenotype of a moth because humans do not have enough acuity in the red-orange spectrum. Well, that's because, this coloration did not evolve for human benefit. It evolved for birds, right? Because these are the predators of the moths. But computationally, algorithmically, we have no problem differentiating between those phenotypes at all. When we tell kids, we can identify individual zebras from photographs using stripes as a fingerprint, essentially, as a body print, right? Anything, in fact, we can identify any striped, spotted, wrinkled, notched animals using even the shape of a whale's fluke or the dorsal fin of a dolphin, and now moving on to facial recognition for primates and bears and other animals. But when we talk about zebras, a lot of kids will ask this question, so baby zebra stripes similar to its mom's? Fantastic question.
It really is.
Right? It really is a fantastic question. But the thing is that until now, we had no ability to answer it because we, as humans, are really good at quantifying similarity of faces. This is what we evolved for, right? Because we use faces for kin recognition, for recognizing who is related to us versus not. We're really good at saying, look, the baby looks like its mom, the baby looks like its dad, or that person looks like that celebrity. But if I show you pairs of zebra pictures and I ask, are those more similar to each other than these two? Not only you cannot learn to do this, but computationally, no problem whatsoever. So now we, for the first time, can start asking and answering questions like this. Are zebra stripes and leopard spots, are they random or are they heritable? Is there some genetic component in that pattern? Are they used in any way for kin recognition? For recognizing, do zebras use it? Or maybe it's just altogether just genetic component that has nothing to do with recognizing your relatives, but still is inherited from parents to kids.
You heard it here first, folks. A new science, imageomics. You are also a director and co-founder of the Artificial Intelligence for Wildlife Conservation software nonprofit WildMe. And I'd like to end by talking a little bit about what WildMe is and what the goals of the project are.
So we've come full circle to this translational aspect of science, going from the fundamental research of extracting biological traits from images to that ability to, for example, recognize individual animal from photographs being useful for conservation. And so WildMe is an artificial intelligence for wildlife conservation nonprofit. It takes these techniques, going really fast cycle, the AI techniques that are being developed as a research project and applying them directly as developing well-engineered with good interface tools that can be used by conservation community. So the prime platform, the main project of WildMe is WildBook, which is a platform that uses individual animal ID from images for about 70 species now and growing, everything from marine to terrestrial, from, now those Hawaiian snails are coming up, but also the weedy and leafy sea dragons and the biggest fish on earth, the whale shark, as well as the zebras and giraffes and leopards and even seals and many others. The ability to identify an individual animal from photograph, as I mentioned, allows not only to count animals for fun, it provides metrics for conservation. Because conservation today has a data problem. We're in the middle of what has been termed as the sixth extinction. We're losing biodiversity at an unprecedented scale and rate. More than 10%, estimated 10% of the Earth's species are threatened with extinction. And yet, we actually don't know very well what we're losing and how fast. UN says that biodiversity has a data problem. And while I'm not a biologist who will go out in the field and implement conservation policy or will really help protect the endangered species, data problem I can do something about. And this is what we're doing. We're bringing in lots and lots and lots more data sources, every image ever. Today, images are probably the most abundant, readily available source of information about anything, including animals, and providing tools to extract information from it so that those can then lead to metrics that can be used not only to understand how many animals are there, what's their range, where they're going, but also estimate whether our conservation policies are actually working, whether the interventions that are being put in place by conservation and wildlife managers are doing the job that we thought they would to protect the biodiversity of the world.
When you say artificial intelligence, that sort of covers a lot. What sort of artificial intelligence are we talking about here?
Machine learning, to be specific. So this is learning, it's very statistical learning. So this is the type of learning that we talk about today in the context of ChatGPT and DALL-E and all of these occasionally scary models that take a lot of data and find patterns in those data. In this case, specifically learning from images, where we learn the types of methods that we have are basically the types of methods that we have, and they already exist off the shelf. We can take an image and find all the other animals in it, other objects of interest. That's detection. We can put a bounding box around each animal. Even in very complex photographs where the animals are one behind the other, like a baby elephant hiding behind its mom, or a group of zebras where you have to start counting legs to figure out how many there are. And then going to species classification, so saying, oh, this is a gravy zebra, this is a savanna elephant, and this is a whale shark, and this is a hawksbill turtle. And then going beyond that to individual identification, and even beyond that today to being able to say this is the head. This is an eye within the head, and these are the limbs, and this is maybe a shell of the turtle or a wing of a bird, and starting to learn associations like it's a belly and it's an orange belly, right? Or it's a beak and then there is a black spot behind the beak. These are semantic kinds of relationships that we as humans learn pretty early on in our childhood and take for granted throughout our adulthood. We need to teach computers how to do it, but these are the types of approaches, the types of methods that today are routinely used already and are being developed for these models like ChatGPT and DALL-E and others.
Tanya Berger Wolf, thank you.
Thank you.
Voices of Excellence is produced and recorded at the Ohio State University College of Arts and Sciences Marketing and Communications Studio. More information about the podcast and our guests can be found at go.osu.edu/voices. Voices of Excellence is produced by Doug Dangler. I'm Jen Farmer.